In my mind, he's the greatest superhero of all time. I would rank him as one of the greatest fictional characters, full stop. Spider-Man was a character who came in at the right time and flipped the tables. You know, the heroes that came before were all invented in the Great Depression. And they were all fantasy, escapism. They had no problems, because people didn't want to read about problems. People had problems in their own life, and they were serious problems. And they wanted, from their comic books, they wanted escapism. And they wanted perfect heroes. And that was just what was demanded at the time. So you had these, perfect square-jawed millionaires and gods and goddesses and aliens from outer space. And in the stories, you didn't spend a lot of time with them out of costume. And that's just the way it was, and they were great. Those are all great characters. 20 years later, you have Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, John Romita Sr. come in, and they wanted to do the opposite. Part of it is marketing. Hey, let's zig where they're zagging. Part of it was it's a different generation. And at the time, Marvel didn't know if it was going to be in business. And so they're like, we may only have one shot. Let's just tell the superhero stories that we want to tell. In fact, it was Stan Lee's wife who said to him, Stan, just tell the story you want to tell in this one issue of Amazing Fantasy 15. And so they did. And it changed all the rules. And at first it was very controversial. And Stan and Steve got yelled at when they got to work. And their boss said, what the hell are you doing? You have this character wearing a full mask. Like burglars. Burglars cover their face. Superheroes don't cover their face. They either wear a little domino mask or they have no mask. It's covering his face. He's got a bug on his chest. Everyone hates bugs. Worst of all, he's this skinny teenager. If a kid is in the comic, they're either a sidekick or they're getting saved. They're not the star. Like, what the hell are you doing? And then they got the sales numbers. And the boss said, keep doing it. Because it's, as I said, different generation. And it was teens who now had disposable income. It's the kids, the greatest generation. The economy is doing great. They have money. They want to read about themselves. That was one of the many ways that Spider-Man was just different from any hero that came before. And he wasn't the popular teenager. He wasn't the jock. Previously, that would have been the hero. Spider-Man is the outcast. He's the nerd. He's in the corner. He's the angry young man that if you read the first, especially 20 issues of Spider-Man, because you see him on his journey, and he's still upset, and he's wounded, and he's angry at the world. He's had a life of being dumped on. The wound is very fresh of being responsible for the death of Uncle Ben, and he finally has his powers, and he's grappling with that, and he's constantly going on that journey of, can I use my powers to make money for my poor aunt? Can I use my powers to be famous? He grapples with that for a while, even past his origin, he grapples with that. He gets beat up all the time. Every new villain that shows up kicks his ass. Sandman, Vulture, Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, they all wreck Spider-Man. Most of the early Spider-Man stories are that same story. The villain shows up, wrecks him. Sometimes Spider-Man, he's crying, he's wounded, he throws his costume in the trash, he's like, never again. And then he has to gather himself and then say, how can I beat them? They're older than me, they're smarter than me. What do I have that they don't have? Goes back to who he is. He's a kid who loves science. So he thinks about, how can I beat them? How can I create something that can cancel out their powers? I love the first 20 issues of Amazing Spider-Man because they invented what Spider-Man was. And from that moment, every other superhero story has been either trying to replicate that or do the opposite of that. But he is a lightning rod. When Spider-Man arrived, it changed everything. And every superhero story after that is in response to Spider-Man.